Hello and welcome to RVN TV's press conference. I'm your host, Jim DeLorenzo, the principal of Jim DeLorenzo Public Relations. You can find me online at jimdelorenzo.com. In my public relations career, I've had the good fortune to meet many interesting people: athletes, entrepreneurs, reporters, coaches, authors, executives, editors, entertainers, and innovators. Each week, I will be bringing some of these interesting people into the studio to ask them insightful questions that will reveal their great stories. Our guest today is Jim Drucker.
Hi, James.
The founder and CEO of Newcadia.com, the world's largest online retailer of collectible comic books. Jim was the commissioner of the Continental Basketball Association, the forerunner of today's NBA G League. And while he was commissioner, he was acclaimed as a marketing whiz and the most creative mind in sports. He built the first minor league feeder system for pro basketball during an 11-year tenure, driving the growth of the league in both revenue and awareness. He started his own live sports production entity, Global Television Sports, and then became the commissioner of arena football, in both cases achieving phenomenal growth and revenues. In 1999, he said he was retiring, but he really left the sports world to then enter the then unknown frontier territory of e-commerce. So, here we are 18 some years later. What was the impetus for you to start an online business selling old comic books?
Well, I had just sold my Arena Football League team, which was one of the perks of having been commissioner. I got a team to sell. Turned out that that team was the Philadelphia Soul, owned by John Bon Jovi. And for the first time in my life since I was like 15 years old, I took the summer off. I was a bum. And I enjoyed it a lot. But then the swimming pools here in the northeast of the United States closed, the middle of September. And my wife said, "What are you going to do now?" And I hadn't really thought about it.
Okay.
It was nice being a bum and sit
Sure.
at the pool and go to lunch with friends. But that's not my DNA. So my wife asked me a question that I had heard 60 to 80 times in my life, first from my mom and then from my wife. And the question was, what are you going to do with that 2 boxes of comics you have sitting collecting dust in the basement? And I said, okay, I'll get rid of them. But I discovered that the market for buying and selling comics was extremely inefficient.
How so?
Well, I wrote letters. I spent 2 weekends typing up an inventory of the 800 comics I had and sent them out to everybody who advertised We Buy Comics. And I got one offer. Now, the guidebook, the price guide for comic books, said the books were worth about $10,000, $11,000.
In total?
In total.
Okay.
Because they were books from my childhood that I always thought I would read again, but I never did.
Sure.
And I said, oh, good, $10,000, $11,000. I'll sell them and I'll stay on vacation another few weeks. But no, the only offer I got was for $250 for all of them.
Wow.
And that's when I realized that unlike the US stock market, where you could buy and sell a stock as easy as a couple of clicks online now, or in those days, in 1999, by just calling up Schwab or an online broker, you couldn't sell comics easily. So, with no knowledge of the computer industry, but having read about this thing called WWW, the World Wide Web, I said, gee, this guy in Seattle is selling books online. Turned out to be Jeff Bezos and Amazon. And they asked Bezos, in an interview I was reading of his, are you selling books because you love to read books? And he said, no. I'm selling books because, number one, they're easy to display on a computer screen, and 2, they're easy to ship.
Wow. That's a...
Yeah, and I said, by golly, same thing with my comic books.
Sure.
So, having never taken a computer course, I taught myself how to program a computer and become a computer nerd.
Oh, wow. And at this point, you're retired and
I'm just killing time.
Killing time.
Killing time, but saying maybe I can make $10,000 in a month or so. which was great money then, still
Right.
great money now. So symbolically, on January 1st, 2000, when about only 2 to 3% of the country had ever purchased anything online, I turned it on.
Okay.
And I remember, I turned it on at 12:01 a.m.
That's
at
great.
the new millennium.
The new millennium.
I thought it would be a good story to tell on TV 20 years later.
Well, here you go.
That's right. So, and I waited. 2 a.m., 3 a.m., no orders.
Okay.
Went to sleep. I woke up at about 9 a.m., and I had received 2 orders, and I got 1 more that day. But the 3 orders were from Laramie, Wyoming, Sydney, Australia, and a different customer in New York City.
And this is all in the space of a couple hours, being
About-
online.
Yeah, it was 1 day.
Yeah.
And I said, boy, it's not a lot of money. I think it was like $38 total, because they bought some of the cheaper books. But I said, you know, there isn't a little comic book store in a mall that will ever have these 3 customers.
Right.
Maybe there's something to this World Wide Web. And I just started selling my 800 comics that I had. Thought it was sort of interesting. I started getting orders from almost every state and a couple of foreign countries. And then a few people started emailing me. I had to learn how to use email. And again, this was 2000. And they had the same refrain. I went to my local comic book store. They offered me 2 cents on the dollar. How about you sell my comics for me on your website, and we'll split the revenue?
Okay.
So I said, yeah, let's give that a shot. Well, after 3 weeks of doing that, I had to get it out of my basement because it was
Right.
getting too big. And long story short, I've taken the 800 comics in 18 years to now 735,000 comics, and we sell 250,000 comics a year to customers in 116 countries and all 50 states.
Wow. Now, as someone who may or may not be familiar with the world of the comic book shop and the traditional storefronts, I am very familiar with them. I've dealt with people in that sector for a long time, and it always seemed to me that you were limited to whatever the comic book shop had in stock and whatever had just come in, and if you were looking for a specific thing, you couldn't find it. And that always seemed to be a frustration for me. You'd have to go to a convention and go to different dealers all at once, you know, try to find if they had the one back issue you were looking for. And what you've done is simplified that so that you can go online, you can go on newcadia.com and find the comic book you're looking for.
Yeah, well, you know, it really wasn't hard because I had Amazon as a model.
Right.
Here I saw this fellow had, you know, a dozen employees or 25 employees at the start, and I didn't have that, but I figured they were smart people.
Right.
So I just imitated a lot of what they did. And their slogan very early in Amazon's career was world's largest selection.
Right.
So I thought, well, my space in a warehouse is so much less expensive than retail space, whereas as a local store will stock maybe 20,000 back issue comics, we're up to 750,000.
Right.
So we have 30 times the variety and selection than a retail brick and mortar store. So over the last 18 years, as I've read that there is no future in brick and mortar, and people scoffed at it in the early 2000s.
Sure.
But they're right. And our prices are lower because our costs are lower. My total cost of salespeople a year, people who will help customers, is 0.
Right.
Because it's all self-service on the internet. And as Amazon put in new functions to their website, I said, my goodness, they must have 30 MBAs working on this, and they're smart kids, so I'll imitate it. So we have our own Newcadia Prime, where you have unlimited shipping for 3 months within the United States, not for $129, but for $8.50. because
Very
we want the repeat customers.
And you mentioned a common thread in our conversations so far has been you're seeing what Amazon does and taking it to heart. You're taking things that have already been tested in the marketplace and applying it to the comic book marketplace.
Primarily. However, in a few areas, we've gone beyond Amazon. We guarantee our shipping, meaning if we say you'll have it in 2 days and you don't, we'll refund your shipping. And it's a full money-back guarantee for 60 days for any reason. If you read it and you didn't like the comic, send it back. We'll buy it back, essentially, and we'll pay the return shipping, which most places don't do. Because if there's one thing I did learn from Jeff Bezos, and it's not that I've ever met him, it's just from listening to him, it's if you are customer-centric, if your customer is the primary focus, you will succeed.
Right.
You know, we used to have an operations manual for my staff for when a customer might call with a question or a complaint. And it was about 200 pages long, covering every possible thing that might go wrong. We threw it out about 8 years ago and replaced it with one sentence. And it might sound a little trite, but it's true. The one sentence is, treat every customer the way you'd like to be treated. So yeah, we'll lose $8 on shipping one book, but we have literally hundreds of emails that have said, I'm now a customer of yours for life, because people don't have to worry.
Right.
And
They've established a relationship with you, and it's almost the golden rule being applied in this instance.
And the key distinction that I learned very early on is that on the internet you have to establish trust with the customer, especially now that so many people have been ripped off by companies that come and go. But after 18 years, a person's not going to make up the fact that a $3 comic came torn where they didn't expect it to be torn.
I would like to ask you a few more questions, but we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Like a person, friends and neighbors will join her quest. Ordinary people will band together against the forces of corporate greed, and together they will form Philadelphia Federal Credit Union, already in a neighborhood near you.
Assurance. It's a word, a touch, a look that sparks a feeling. Peace of mind that everything will be all right. These are the moments that inspire us to do more than you'd ever expect from a car insurance company at a price that's less than you'd expect. This is more than just insurance. This is Plymouth Rock Assurance. Visit us at PlymouthRock.com.
Hi, my name's Casey Price, host of a brand new show called Everyday Elder Care. My show will help you take the stress out of caring for your elderly loved one by educating you about options and solutions you may not even know exist. Tune in every Tuesday at noon on RVN TV. We'll see you there.
Imagine the finest hand-selected USDA prime steak you'll ever have. The freshest line-caught seafood, our Wine Spectator award-winning wine list, and soul-satisfying desserts. Bring that together with the perfect date, the winning business deal, a memorable family celebration. Welcome to Rod's Steak and Seafood Grill in nearby Morristown, New Jersey. Bring your appetite and feed your passion.
Pearly
Hello and welcome back to RVN TV's press conference. I'm Jim DeLorenzo, and my guest today is Jim Drucker. You can find Jim online at newcadia.com, NEWKADIA.com. And we're talking about newcadia.com, and we were talking a little bit about some of the innovations that you've set up for the company. One of the things I found most interesting about our initial conversations a few months ago was how you took an old Army manual, an Army manual from World War II, and it described how to have a perfect inventory system.
I knew nothing about retail. My background had been as the commissioner of the Continental Basketball Association, where the only inventory I had were coaches like Phil Jackson, George Karl, and Rick Carlisle. Sure. So I'm a big believer. You don't have to reinvent the wheel if someone has already done it.
Sure.
So I found online in 2001, because I suffered through a terrible inventory system in the first year, an old Army manual from World War II, where some colonel had described, this is the best size for shelving. Here is the typical height of an American. Here's how many
in depth.
Here's how many feet you should have a cut through so they can cut from one aisle to the next. Here's how many shelves you should build. 4 is the best, fastest. So we simply implemented his brilliant ideas, so that where most stores, if someone was to buy, say, 12 comics, it would take a person running through the aisles 12 minutes.
Right.
Or a minute a comic. Our inventory system, which is totally computerized, we can pick 400 an hour instead of 60 an hour.
So you have a software program that supports that you created with your designers and your input, and you have a warehousing system that you developed through this utilizing this old Army manual.
Yeah.
And you have packaging and shipping that you've designed to implement. Speediest and most efficient
a customer
way.
For comic books, and every industry is different, but the key is what the issue is. The first issue of, say, Superman in Action Comics #1, if you had it in perfect condition today, it had originally been sold for 10 cents. It would be worth $3.4 million.
Oh my God.
You probably wish you had one.
I certainly do. I wish that I had, or maybe my father had bought it. I wish I wasn't around in '39.
See, but that's the difference between you and me. You wish you had one. I wish I had a dozen. So they're concerned about what issue it is, the condition the book is in. When I couldn't find a box that appropriately protected the corners from bending and kept a comic book rigid, we created our own boxes.
Wow.
So every step of the way we've tried to outdo Amazon.
Sure.
And our boxes today look a lot like Amazon boxes because they know what they're doing.
Right.
You get it, you don't have to get a knife, you just zip it open. They're neat, they're clean, and they're protecting comics.
And that's interesting because now my father bought me this when I was 5 years old. It was the first comic book I ever. This is not the exact copy. My original copy is tattered and torn. I still have it though. But there are so many people my age, younger, older, who have comic books sitting in their basements or sitting in their garages or sitting somewhere in the house. And the other thing that I find interesting about collectible comic books is that there are people who may not know that they have these collectible comic books. They may be, maybe it was the husband's collection and the husband has passed away and now the widow has to find what to do with it. Tell me how Newcadia helps.
We've tweaked our program since the first person called and said, will you sell my comics?
Right.
And now, when a person has comics that they want to turn into cash, we can help them quickly and easily. We grade every comic individually and assign it a value, which is based upon the Overstreet Price Guide, which is the official Bible of the industry for prices. And then, as each book sells, the owner of the book gets between 50 and 80% of the sales price. The result is they usually start selling in the same day.
You have like almost a 24-hour turnaround.
Yeah, because the second we get them, they go online, and the customers see it live. Our website is just like an Amazon. If you see it, it's in stock. And an interesting thing, because people always say, well, what is a comic worth? What are my comics worth? Or are they worth anything? Well, the truth is, they're all worth something. Now, people say, well, I've got some comics and the covers have been ripped off. Well, we've sold comics with without a cover for as much as $40.
Wow.
An early issue of Superman or Batman.
Oh, sure, because of
from the 40s
historical
or 50s.
value of it.
Right. Or the first issue we just sold about a month ago again, the first time Wolverine ever appeared in a comic. Wasn't a very good looking book. It was ripped, it was torn, it was the cover was bent a little bit, and it only sold for $3,150.
Is that all? I'll have to mark that down.
But here's the thing, but when it comes to what the pricing is, we do one other thing that even Amazon doesn't do. Because these are all used collectibles.
Right.
And the price guide is guesstimating what a book is worth. So if they say a book is worth $50, we'll start the price at $50, but then every day the book remains unsold, the price ticks down a little bit.
Okay.
Because the real value of an old collectible is not what some guy who's writing a book says it's worth. It's what a real person will pay for the book.
Is willing to pay.
And we've had over 15 million shoppers at our online store. So with customers from all over the world, we'll get it sold.
So it's a real-time pricing marketplace.
Yes, and every day at 3 a.m. Eastern Time, the computer turns a switch, and based upon our algorithms, the price drops based upon the number of copies of that issue we have in stock and the popularity of that book. It's our secret sauce.
Gotcha. Now, some of the most popular books, I think we have some of the books that are most popular at newcadia.com over the last year. Walking Dead is a big title recently because of the popularity of the TV show.
And by the way, it brings up an interesting point. The very first issue of The Walking Dead, which has a cover price, I think, of $2.99 or $2.50. Some people wouldn't expect to have a big value. Now, that's issue number 100. But issue number 1 recently sold on eBay for $10,000.
Wow.
So there are times that people have, oh, I've got a pile of comics. They don't know what they're worth. We'll find out what they're worth, and we'll get what they're worth.
And the interesting thing about Walking Dead as an example, and this is something we'll touch on, is that Walking Dead started as a comic book. People didn't know that it was a comic book until it became a TV show. And people think, oh, they're doing a comic book about the TV show. Walking Dead was actually a comic book first.
And as a result, they're valuable. Right. If the medium that a character first appeared was a comic book, then it's a real valuable comic, like The Walking Dead. Or Spider-Man didn't appear in the movies first, appeared in comic books first. And this is the issue, Amazing Spider-Man #1. They rebooted the numbers.
Right.
They got up to 441 in the original set, and then they rebooted back to #1 a couple of years ago. So people thought, oh, the original #1 from 1963, that's worth $80,000. I'll buy a dozen #1s from 2014.
Right. Speculators market.
Yeah, they've gotten killed because that $2.99 book today is worth about $2.99.
Well, I know that over the course of your 18 years in business, Amazing Spider-Man has been your most consistently the top-selling book.
Yeah, for every month except 4 in 18 years.
Wow.
18 and a half years, I think it's 296 months.
And this is just before the movies came out, just before it really took off.
There were no superhero movies for the previous 15 years. I was just looking to get rid of my comics.
How about that?
But here, I'll tell you how smart and stupid I am. I went from working no hours a week, Jim, to working 50 hours a week.
And you're retired.
That's right.
I love that. So what are some of the other books that we have here? X-Men, of course, has been very popular.
That is the highest selling comic of all time. Over 5 million copies of that issue were sold. That was also the 1991 reboot of X-Men.
Okay. And then That, of course, the movies keep coming out. There's another one coming out this summer.
God bless them. That's the 500th issue of Batman. And what is difficult to see on a flat screen like a television or a computer monitor is that's a great-looking glossy cover.
And it has an embossed logo on it.
Yeah, and we actually sold a ton of them framed.
Oh, wow.
Until we gave that up
Right.
because it just wasn't worth our time.
Wasn't-
Send them
didn't
out
fit
to a
the
framing
business model,
store.
right.
Right. Our whole idea is to get the books in, get the right price on them, and get them out.
How long does that process take usually?
It varies. For something that is what collectors call a key issue, the first appearance of a Wolverine,
Right.
The first issue of Spider-Man in Amazing Fantasy Comics, for the first appearance of Poison Ivy, a villain of Batman's, they'll sell within 24 hours.
Wow.
The duds, the heroes you've never heard of, they can sit a while. But those books we drop in price faster so we can get rid of them.
Right.
Because you might think, and the official price guide might say the book is $3 or $30 or $300, but again, the price is what someone's willing to pay.
Sure.
And we have a big enough worldwide audience to find that price.
And over 15 million customers
Yeah.
in 18 years. Another one of the books that I think you have, we mentioned Wolverine along the way.
Death of Wolverine. But don't worry, in comic books, no one ever stays dead. He's back alive now,
Except for
3
Uncle
years
Ben,
later.
usually. Uncle Ben is
Uncle
young.
Ben is about the only
Yeah.
person they haven't brought back. He was Spider-Man's uncle. And he might hold the record for the longest death in comics.
Ever since Bucky came back, all bets are off.
Everybody comes back eventually.
Star Wars, of course, is a popular...
Yeah, and that was in 2015 when Marvel bought the Star Wars franchise from George Lucas. They let all the old licensing agreements expire, and now Marvel is publishing the Star Wars series.
And they were the original publishers of the Star Wars comic books
Back in 76.
In 76. And now
But interesting, but because, as you said earlier, Star Wars first started in the movies
Right.
and then moved to comics, not as valuable as The Walking Dead, which started in comics.
That's interesting. Okay. And I think we were talking about the comic book price guide a little while
Yeah,
ago.
that's the price guide for Action Comics #1. And the number on the far right, if you can read it, says 3,500,000. So if you have a copy of Action Comics #1 from the 1930s, and it's in perfect condition, meaning the condition it was when it came off the price guide, off the printing press, you have won the lottery.
$3.5 million. Okay. Well, some of the other things that I like to talk about with you, Jim, when we have our conversations is you've got this great business that you've established. You have a dedicated crew of about 4 or 5 people in a warehouse that will remain undisclosed, but it's in the Philadelphia suburbs. And people ask you, how do I send my books in? What do I do? Do I contact you first?
Yeah, well, actually, there's a link on the website, and the URL is easy. It's www.newcadia.com/ and then the word sell, S-E-L-L. And that'll give you some idea. But also on our website, www.newcadia.com, if you go down to the bottom of the page, our phone number is listed. Call us during business hours, which is essentially 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday, and
You'll get someone in person.
You'll get someone in person, and they'll guide you through that page.
That's the great thing about a company like newcadia.com is that there are people behind it, and it's not just some anonymous person, that you can't reach out to. Jim has pioneered that, and I think that's one of the things, being customer-centric, that really says a lot about newcadia.com and Jim's approach. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back for another segment in a few moments.
For independent living for seniors age 62 and over, People Inc. offers safe, maintenance-free apartments across Western New York. The affordable rent is income-based. For more information, call People Inc. Senior Living at 817-9090.
In a world where bankers have lost all interest, where robots and fat cats rule our fortunes, one woman will stand up and strive to do the impossible. Be treated like a person. Friends and neighbors will join her quest. Ordinary people will band together against the forces of corporate greed. And together they will form Philadelphia Federal Credit Union, already in a neighborhood near you.
Welcome back to RVN TV's press conference. I'm Jim DeLorenzo, your host, and our guest today is Jim Drucker, founder and CEO of Newcadia.com, the world's largest online comic book retail marketplace. And we were talking about buying and selling comic books. You had over 15 million customers buying comics at Newcadia.com. How many do you think have sold comics through Newcadia.com?
I would say the great majority, about 80% of our stock is from consigners.
Okay.
And every month the checks go out automatically right from our bank. We've tried to automate the whole system because a brick and mortar store doing what we would do, I've been told would take 20 to 30 employees. We do it with 5.
Wow. Now, you're 18 years into this. You were trying to find something to do to keep basically your wife happy and keep your home life happy, at the same time finding something to do while you were supposedly retired. Are there any lessons that you've learned coming out of the sports world, coming out of the TV world, and now into the e-commerce world, for want of a better phrase?
Well, if you want to be an entrepreneur and do a startup, you better have a supportive family behind you. And my family has always been supportive.
That's wonderful.
So that when you're working at 3 a.m. for 20 nights in a row, they're asking you, are you making progress, rather than why are you doing that?
That's a great example of that, yeah. I think that's very interesting, and I think one of the things that I like to hear from someone like Jim is the fact that I have a second act, I have a third act. You have here basically a second act in a completely different industry.
And that was the fascination with it. You know, I was curious because my dad had been an NBA referee in the 1950s and 60s. He worked for 25 years as a ref. So people naturally assumed when I went to the Continental Basketball Association, it was, quote, because of my dad.
Right.
No, he told me not to take the job. I had a law degree from Duke, a master's of law from Temple, and figured I'd be a law school professor one day.
Sure.
So he thought running into a small minor league was, the CBA, was a disaster for me. But I was curious when I started this, and when I said I'll make it a business, whether I could do something without anybody's perceived coattails pushing me forward.
And you have.
Yeah, and it's very self-satisfying. And you know, people say, oh, do you love to read comics? Yeah, I did when I was 7 to 12, and then again during college. Right. But to me, the fascination is taking something from scratch and seeing how high you can take it.
Well, that's wonderful. Congratulations on where
you've
taken Newcadia.com to. If you're looking for more information, if you have some old comic books in your house that you want to get rid of and find the best way to get some holiday cash, take a look at Newcadia.com/sell. If you're looking to buy some old comic books, there's no better place to look than Newcadia.com. And if you're looking for questions and answers regarding public relations, if you would like to reach out to me, I can be reached on Twitter at JHD16. You can email me, jim@jhdenterprises.com, or you can look for me online at jimdelorenzo.com. Thank you very much for joining us today. I look forward to our next show, and I'm thankful for Jim Drucker
Thanks, Jim.
Being our guest today. Have a good week.